An old man sits beside a fire. He's got no teeth left, just one lonely canine hanging on. His tribe feeds him soft food, bone marrow, bits of brain. He can't hunt anymore. He can't even chew tough meat. And yet, they keep him alive. Why? Because he's human. And even 1.77 million years ago, humans cared for one another. This old man was Homo erectus, and the skull they found, now in what's modern-day Georgia, tells us something astonishing about his kind, something that explains both their incredible success and, strangely enough, their eventual disappearance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If these videos help you drift off or just unwind, hit subscribe. Where's everyone watching from tonight? Drop your city and time. Last time I saw people from Dublin to Dallas, and I spent way too long trying to figure out those time zones. Anyway, here's what blows my mind about Homo erectus. These people lasted nearly 2 million years. 2 million years. Modern humans, us, have only been around for maybe 300,000. We like to think we're special, advanced, unstoppable, but Homo erectus outlasted us by a factor of 6, at least so far. We still have time to catch up. They spread across continents from Africa to China, Indonesia, even Europe. They survived ice ages. They hunted elephants and rhinos. They made advanced stone tools. They probably used fire, maybe even boats. These weren't grunting cavemen. They were smart, skilled, and astonishingly adaptable. So why did they vanish? That's what we're digging into today. And when I first started researching, I thought the answer would be obvious. Climate change, volcanoes, or maybe competition from modern humans. But the truth is a lot more complex. And honestly, kind of heartbreaking. Homo erectus didn't fail. They succeeded too well. And that success might be the very thing that doomed them. Okay, first things first. When I say they were successful, I mean legendary successful. The most enduring human species ever. No contest. They first appeared around 2 million years ago, maybe earlier. We're not totally sure since the fossil record from that time is, well, patchy. But we have fossils in both Africa and Asia almost right away. That's wild. It means they either evolved super fast and spread like wildfire, or they emerged in multiple places at once. Scientists still argue about that part. Here's what we do know. By 1.9 million years ago, they were already in China. By 1.8 million, Indonesia. Europe, maybe 1 million years ago, maybe earlier. They were everywhere. And they stayed that way for ages. Most human species show up, stick around for a few 100,000 years, then vanish or evolve. But Homo erectus just kept going, and going, and going. The latest fossils we've found, on Java, are about 100,000 years old. Some researchers think they might have lasted even longer, but we can't confirm that yet. That's nearly 2 million years of existence. No other human species comes close, so what was their secret? Well, for one, they were smart. Not modern human smart, but way beyond anything before them. Their average brain was about 950 cubic centimeters. For comparison, a chimp's is around 400, ours about 1,350. So yeah, pretty good middle ground. But intelligence isn't just brain size, it's what you do with it. And Homo erectus did a lot. They created the Acheulean hand axe, the Stone Age's version of a Swiss army knife. It could cut meat, slice plants, carve wood, maybe even take down animals if used right. These weren't random chunks of rock. They were symmetrical, standardized, and crafted with skill and planning. And get this, we find the same design across continents: Africa, Europe, Asia. That means either the design spread through teaching and migration, or they were smart enough to invent the same thing independently, multiple times. Either way, that's seriously impressive. They also hunted big animals, elephants, rhinos, hippos. You don't just walk up to a rhino with a stick. That takes strategy, teamwork, communication. Maybe not full language, but something. Proto-speech, shared signals, teaching. You don't survive 2 million years by grunting randomly. And fire? They probably mastered that too. The evidence is debated, but we've found sites showing controlled fire use at least 1 million years ago, maybe more. Fire changes everything. Cooked food means more calories and easier digestion. Warmth means survival in cold climates. Light and smoke mean safety from predators. Fire is the ultimate human cheat code. So picture this: a species of early humans, clever, social, adaptable, spread across half the planet. They survived nearly anything Earth threw at them. And then, slowly, they started to disappear. Not all at once, region by region. First Africa, then Europe, then Asia. By around 100,000 years ago, they were gone. After 2 million years of thriving, they vanished. Why? Some say it was climate change. The Earth was shifting fast, colder, drier, harsher. Homo erectus had weathered climate swings before, but maybe this one broke their streak. Maybe the world changed faster than even they could adapt. There's real evidence behind this. A 2020 study found that Homo erectus lost more than half of its climate niche around this time. In other words, the environments they were built for started disappearing, and maybe they just couldn't adapt fast enough. But I don't think that's the whole story, because other human species faced the same environmental chaos, and they made it. Neanderthals survived, early Homo sapiens survived. So why not erectus? Some researchers blame competition. By around 100,000 years ago, modern humans, us, were spreading out of Africa. We were sharper. We had better tools, full language, richer social systems. Maybe we simply outcompeted Homo erectus, took their hunting grounds, their food sources, their space. It happens all the time in nature. A newer species evolves, does things just a little better, and pushes the old one out. It's called competitive exclusion, and it probably played a part. But here's where things get fascinating and a little tragic. Homo erectus didn't just vanish overnight. They were absorbed. Modern humans didn't completely replace them. We interbred with them, just like we did with Neanderthals and Denisovans. When early Homo sapiens spread out of Africa and met these other humans, we didn't only fight or avoid them. We had children with them, which means Homo erectus never really disappeared. Not entirely. Their DNA still lingers in us, tiny fragments, but they're there. So in a way, Homo erectus never died out. They became us. But that still doesn't explain everything. Why did the pure Homo erectus populations fade away? Why didn't they coexist with modern humans the way Neanderthals did for a while? I think it comes down to something simple, something I hinted at earlier. Homo erectus was too successful. And yeah, that sounds backward. How can success lead to extinction? But think about it. They'd been thriving for nearly 2 million years. They'd spread across 3 continents. They'd mastered their tools, perfected their hunts, built stable ways of life. And that was the problem. They'd gotten so good at one way of living that when the world changed, when climates shifted and new competition appeared, they couldn't pivot fast enough. They were too specialized, too set in their ways. We, on the other hand, were new and flexible. We had language, creativity, art and culture, tools that let us adapt lightning fast. We could invent, improvise, explore new strategies, and move to new environments without waiting for our biology to catch up. Homo erectus was like a master craftsman who spent 2 million years perfecting a single trade. We were the restless newcomers who could learn anything. And in a changing world, adaptability always beats perfection. At least, that's my theory. Scientists are still debating this, and honestly, we might never know the full story. The fossil record from that era is spotty, incomplete, full of mysteries. But one thing's for sure: Homo erectus was extraordinary. They cared for their elders. They hunted cooperatively. They made tools that remained unchanged for nearly 2 million years. They were human in all the ways that matter. And their story is our story. Because we came from them. Their DNA runs in us. Their inventions, their fire, their cooking, their tools, their teamwork, all of it got passed down through time and helped shape who we are today. Now, before we go any further, let's rewind to how we even discovered these people, because that story is wild. It's 1891 on the island of Java, Indonesia. A Dutch doctor named Eugène Dubois is digging along a riverbank when he uncovers something unbelievable. A skullcap, a thigh bone, and a few teeth. At that point, the only early human fossils ever found were Neanderthals. That was it. And people were still arguing about whether Darwin's theory of evolution was even real. The idea that humans came from apes? Completely scandalous. Then Dubois shows up with this skull, a brain way bigger than a chimp's, but still primitive looking, with thick brow ridges and a flat forehead. The thigh bone proved it walked upright like us, but the rest looked ancient. Scientists didn't know what to think. Some said it was a giant ape. Others said it was a missing link. Dubois called it Pithecanthropus erectus, the upright ape man. Most of his peers laughed him off. They thought he was exaggerating or just plain wrong. It wasn't until 1921, when more fossils were discovered in China, that people started taking him seriously. They found Peking man, hundreds of fossils from over 40 individuals in a cave near Beijing, skulls, tools, even evidence of fire. Suddenly, it was undeniable. There had been an ancient human species spread all across Asia. They were real. Both Java man and Peking man were later renamed Homo erectus in 1950, upright man. And ever since, we've kept uncovering their story. Fossils in Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia. They were everywhere. But here's what really gets me. When those first fossils were found, scientists assumed Homo erectus was basically half ape, barely human, a primitive creature just stumbling toward intelligence. We were so wrong. Every new discovery shows the opposite. That Homo erectus was far more advanced, far more human than anyone imagined. Remember that old man I mentioned at the start, the one with no teeth? He lived to be around 40, which was ancient back then, and his people cared for him for years after he lost his teeth. They fed him soft foods. They kept him alive, because even 2 million years ago, being human meant something deeper than survival. It meant taking care of each other. They cared for him, even when he could no longer contribute to the group. That is compassion. That's empathy. That's humanity. And it wasn't an isolated case. We've found other examples, like an 8-year-old boy with a severe spinal condition. He could barely walk or bend. The pain would have been constant, unbearable. Yet he lived for years. His people took care of him. We've even found fossils of a child with a major brain deformity, severe cognitive disabilities. This kid would have needed round-the-clock care, and still, that child survived for at least 5 years. That wasn't survival of the fittest. That was survival of the most caring. And honestly, I think that's the real secret behind Homo erectus's success. Not just their tools, their fire, or their bigger brains. It was their ability to care, to cooperate, to build communities where the strong protected the weak and everyone looked out for each other. That's what made them human. That's what made them us. But it might also be what made them vulnerable in the end. Because here's the thing about being a caring, cooperative species. It works beautifully when times are good, when there's food, stability, and enough for everyone to pull their weight. But when resources start running out, when the climate shifts, when new competition moves in, those same old people and sick kids can become a heavy burden. I'm not saying Homo erectus stopped caring, But in hard times, species that can adapt quickly and travel light tend to survive better. And that's where we came in. Modern humans were younger, faster, more flexible. We could change strategies on the fly. We didn't have 2 million years of tradition holding us back. We were scrappy, creative, endlessly adaptable. And when we arrived, Homo erectus just couldn't compete. It wasn't their fault. They weren't inferior. They were simply too set in their ways, too good at what they'd always done. And when the world changed, they couldn't change fast enough with it. So when we ask, why did Homo erectus go extinct? Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe they didn't go extinct at all. Maybe they just became us. Here's the truth. We don't actually know how much Homo erectus DNA lives on in modern humans. We don't have complete genetic samples from their fossils yet, but we do know we interbred with Neanderthals. We do know we interbred with Denisovans, and Homo erectus existed far longer than either of them. So statistically, it's almost certain we interbred with them too. Their genes, their traits, their hard-earned survival skills, all of that lives on in us. Homo erectus didn't fail. They didn't lose. They just evolved into something new, into us. Now that we know Homo erectus was far more human than anyone once believed, let's talk about what they actually look like, because the truth might surprise you. When you see reconstructions, they look different from us, but also kind of familiar. First off, they weren't giants. Forget the stereotype of huge, hulking cavemen. Homo erectus was about average height, anywhere from 4 feet 9 to around 6 feet 1, and typically between 88 and 150 pounds. And yeah, if you're imagining a 6-foot-tall human at 150 pounds, that's lean. Athlete lean. And that's exactly what they were. These weren't bulky weightlifters. They were tough, wiry endurance runners. And yes, you heard that right. Runners. Homo erectus could run, really run. Not just sprint away from danger, but chase prey for hours. Their bodies were built for it. Long legs, shorter arms, narrow hips, almost identical proportions to modern humans. We've even found their footprints in Kenya, dated to about 1.5 million years ago. And when scientists analyzed them, they realized the stride was identical to ours. Same gait, same rhythm, same everything. If you saw those tracks today, you'd think a modern person made them. And here's another wild detail. They could throw. Really throw. Their shoulders were built for high-speed, long-distance throwing, which makes perfect sense if you're hunting massive, dangerous animals with primitive weapons. Being able to hurl a spear or stone from a safe distance? Huge advantage. But the most surprising thing about their bodies? They were probably hairless. Now, we can't know for sure, soft tissue doesn't fossilize, but genetic evidence from the MC1R receptor suggests that humans lost most of our body hair about 1.2 million years ago, right in the middle of Homo erectus's reign. Why lose your fur? Simple. Heat. Because they were runners, endurance hunters. And running long distances under the sun builds a lot of heat. If you're covered in thick fur, you overheat fast. But if you're mostly hairless, you can sweat. And sweating is the single most efficient cooling system in the animal kingdom. That's what gave Homo erectus their edge. They could do something no other predator on Earth could, run their prey to exhaustion. Gazelles, antelope, they were much faster. But they couldn't regulate body temperature like humans can. So Homo erectus would simply jog after them. Not sprint, just a steady, relentless jog. The animal would bolt, then stop to cool off. The humans would catch up. Then the animal would run again, stop again, hour after hour, until finally the animal collapsed from heat and exhaustion, and Homo erectus would walk up calmly and finish the job. Persistence hunting, the original human superpower. This kind of hunting is called persistence hunting, and believe it or not, some groups in Africa still do it today. The San Bushmen of southern Africa, for example, will chase a kudu antelope for hours until it finally gives up. But going hairless came with a trade-off. Without fur, your skin is exposed to the sun, which means you need darker pigmentation to protect against UV radiation. So, Homo erectus probably had dark skin, at least those living in Africa or other sunny regions. Those who migrated north into Europe or Asia likely developed lighter skin tones over time, because in places with less sunlight, your body needs more UV exposure to make vitamin D. And we actually have evidence of this adaptation. A 500,000-year-old Homo erectus fossil found in Turkey showed signs of tubercular meningitis, a disease that worsens in darker-skinned individuals living in low sunlight regions. That suggests this person still had dark skin, even though they lived far north. Maybe their group had just migrated, or maybe skin color took longer to adapt. Either way, it proves Homo erectus faced the same evolutionary pressures we deal with today. Now, let's talk about their heads, because that's where things get really interesting. You can spot a Homo erectus skull instantly. The shape is long and low, with a thick, heavy brow ridge over the eyes, and not just a little bump. We're talking serious bone structure. We always ask, why did Homo erectus have such big brows? But honestly, the better question is, why don't we? Every other great ape has them. Chimps, gorillas, orangutans. We're the odd ones out. The reason we lost them probably comes down to social communication. Moving your eyebrows is a powerful nonverbal tool. Surprise, confusion, curiosity, anger, all those subtle expressions we use to read each other's emotions. Big brow ridges would have limited that movement. So, as humans became more social and expressive, our brows shrank to allow for more facial nuance. But for Homo erectus, those ridges still served a purpose: protection. If you're living in a world where getting hit in the face is a real possibility, having a ridge of bone guarding your eyes isn't a bad design. Let's be honest. Humans have been fighting over dumb things for millions of years. Their faces were flatter than earlier hominins, more human-like, but still distinct. And they had actual noses, not flat nostrils like chimps. That projecting nose probably helped warm and moisten dry air before it hit their lungs, handy when you're spending your life running under the African sun. Some scientists even think the nose helped them track smells, acting like a kind of natural GPS. I'm skeptical, though. Humans aren't exactly known for great sniffing skills compared to other animals. Now, the real magic: the brain. Homo erectus had an average brain size of around 950 cubic centimeters, smaller than ours, but way bigger than any of their ancestors. Some individuals had brains as small as 546 cubic centimeters, others up to 1,250 cubic centimeters. A huge range, far more than we see in modern humans. But size isn't everything. What really mattered was the structure. Their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain for planning, decision-making, and personality, was larger than before, though still smaller than ours. Interestingly, a 1-year-old Homo erectus fossil shows that they grew up fast. Modern human children take ages to mature. Our brains keep developing into our 20s. That long childhood gives us time to learn, adapt, and build complex thinking skills. But Homo erectus kids developed quicker, meaning they probably didn't reach the same level of abstract intelligence we have today. Still, they were light years ahead of anything that came before them. They made tools, used fire, organized hunts, cared for the injured, and spread across 3 continents. That's not luck, that's intelligence. And surviving for nearly 2 million years? That's genius-level success in evolutionary terms. Now, let's talk about their teeth, because teeth tell stories. Homo erectus had the thinnest tooth enamel of any early human species. Enamel protects teeth from wear and cracking, and thin enamel means they weren't eating hard, raw foods like nuts or tubers. Earlier species like Australopithecus had thick enamel because they needed it to chew tough stuff. But Homo erectus didn't, because they were cooking and processing food first. Fire softens meat and breaks down fibrous plants. Stone tools helped them crack open bones to get to the nutrient-rich marrow inside. Once you can do that, you don't need thick enamel anymore. Still, their jaws were strong, thicker than ours, meaning they had serious bite force. What they used that power for is still up for debate. Their teeth couldn't handle hard objects, but they could chew through tough, dried meat or raw flesh. Their diet was incredibly diverse: meat, fish, fruit, nuts, seeds, tubers, even turtles and crocodiles. They were opportunists, eating whatever they could find. And the big game hunting? That's the part that blows my mind. Taking down an elephant with Stone Age tech isn't a solo act. It's strategy, teamwork, communication. You'd need people distracting the animal, others circling and aiming for vital spots. Then, after the kill, comes butchering. No one's dragging an elephant back to camp. They had to slice it up right there, using sharp stone tools to cut through thick hide and muscle. Some researchers even think Homo erectus dried their meat. Makes sense. You can't eat an entire elephant before it rots. Drying it in the sun would preserve it for weeks. We can't prove that directly. Dried meat doesn't fossilize, but the logic fits what we know. And then there's the bone marrow thing. We've found tons of cracked bones at Homo erectus sites. They loved marrow. It's rich in fat and calories, basically prehistoric power food. And here's the clever part. Most predators couldn't get to it. Lions and hyenas can't break the biggest bones, but Homo erectus could, with tools. So after a lion finished its meal, Homo erectus would stroll in, crack open the leftovers, and feast on the marrow inside. Free calories no one else could reach. That's called scavenging, and they mastered it. They weren't just hunters, they were opportunists, always ready to claim what others left behind. And thanks to their endurance, they could run for hours to reach a fresh carcass before the vultures or hyenas did. It's survival, strategy, and adaptation, all wrapped up in one species that refused to quit. So, we've talked about what Homo erectus looked like and what they ate. Now let's talk about something even more fascinating: their tools. This is where Homo erectus really started changing the game. They're the ones who invented the hand axe, technically called Apulian hand axe, named after the site in France where the first ones were found. But hand axe is a lot easier to say. And these things, total game changers. Before Homo erectus, earlier hominins made much simpler tools, just flakes of rock chipped off from a bigger stone. You'd smash two rocks together, take the sharp edge that broke off, and use it to cut or scrape things. Crude, but effective. But hand axes were something else entirely. They were symmetrical, teardrop-shaped, and carefully shaped on both sides. A process called bifacial flaking. That means you couldn't just randomly hit rocks together. You had to plan ahead, visualize what the final tool should look like, know which parts to chip off, in which order, at what angle, and with how much force. It's not easy. I've tried making stone tools myself, and it's surprisingly difficult. Too hard of a strike and the whole thing shatters. Too soft and nothing happens. Yet Homo erectus perfected it. We've found hand axes all over the Old World, Africa, Europe, and Asia. And here's what's wild. They all look almost identical. Same size, same shape, same design. That means one of two things. Either the design spread as groups migrated and taught each other, or Homo erectus in different parts of the world independently invented the same tool. Either way, it's amazing. If the design spread through teaching, that means cultural transmission, passing down knowledge from generation to generation. That's communication, maybe even the roots of language. If they invented it independently, it means their brains were advanced enough to figure out the same solution through trial and error. That's problem solving. That's innovation. Personally, I lean toward the first explanation, cultural transmission. We see hand axes appearing in new regions over time, radiating outward from Africa, which lines up with migration and teaching, not coincidence. But however it happened, one thing's for sure, the hand axe was the dominant tool for over 1 million years. Think about that. One tool design used for more than 1 million years, barely changing. That's mind-blowing. Modern humans invent new technology every few years. But Homo erectus stuck with the same design for millennia. Was it because they weren't innovative enough to improve it? Or because the hand axe was already so perfect, it didn't need improvement? Honestly, I think it's the latter. A good hand axe could do almost anything. Cut meat, scrape hides, chop wood, dig for roots, even kill animals if needed. It was the Swiss Army knife of the Stone Age. Why fix what isn't broken? But hand axes weren't their only tools. We've also found evidence of wooden spears, bone tools, and shell tools. The problem is, wood and bone don't survive the ages. They decay, they rot. Stone is the only thing that lasts long enough for us to find, which means we're probably missing a huge chunk of the Homo erectus toolkit. Who knows what else they were making? Baskets, ropes, clothing, clubs, fishing nets. All of that would have vanished long ago. Still, we do have one incredible piece of evidence, an 800,000-year-old barbed bone point from Africa. It's carved with 3 precise barbs. You don't need barbs to hunt. A simple sharp spear works fine, but barbs keep prey from slipping off the point, especially fish. That means Homo erectus was spear fishing and skilled enough to craft specialized hunting gear. If they could make barbed points that long ago, what else were they capable of? Carved wooden tools? Bone-tipped spears for big game? Specialized gear for different tasks? We may never know. And that drives me crazy. Now let's talk about something even more transformative. Fire. Fire might be the single most important technology in human history. The earliest evidence of fire use is debated. We've got burned sediments dating back 1.7 million years, but we can't be certain those fires were made by humans. They could have been wildfires. By about 1.5 million years ago, though, burned bones and charred stones start showing up more often. And by 1 million years ago, most scientists agree. Homo erectus was using fire and likely controlling it. At first, they probably got it from nature. A lightning strike sets a bush ablaze. After it burns out, Homo erectus approaches and finds cooked meat in the ashes. It smells good, it tastes amazing, and it's easier to chew and digest. Soon, they start following smoke, searching for fires, maybe collecting embers and keeping them alive. You can keep a fire going forever if you never let it fully die. Eventually, they must have figured out how to make their own. Maybe using flint and pyrite to strike sparks, like later Neanderthals did. We don't know exactly when, but it's likely some Homo erectus groups discovered this skill. And once they had fire, everything changed. Fire made food safer and easier to digest, giving them more calories from less effort. It provided warmth in cold climates, light at night, and protection from predators. Lions and hyenas won't go near flames. It also created something else. Community. Imagine sitting around a fire at night, sharing food, telling stories, comforting the sick, watching the sparks drift into the dark. Fire gave Homo erectus a reason to gather, to bond, to care for one another. It may even explain why they were so compassionate, caring for their injured and elderly. Around the fire, everyone had a place. Even those who couldn't hunt could still belong. Fire didn't just make them safer, it made them more human. But that brings up a huge question. How did Homo erectus spread so far, so fast? By 1.8 million years ago, they were already in Indonesia, thousands of miles from Africa. And Indonesia is made of islands that were never connected to mainland Asia, even during the ice ages when sea levels dropped. So how did they get there? Some of those islands are separated by more than 15 miles of open ocean. You can't swim that far, especially not with children, supplies, and elders. That means only one thing. They built boats. Sounds crazy, right? But it's the only explanation that fits the evidence. We found Homo erectus tools on islands like Flores, home of the hobbits, Homo floresiensis, Luzon in the Philippines, and possibly even Crete in the Mediterranean. All of these islands were always separated from the mainland, yet Homo erectus made it there. So they must have figured out some kind of watercraft. What did those boats look like? We don't know. Wood doesn't fossilize well, especially in tropical climates. But we can make educated guesses. Maybe they used big logs as floats, or lashed several together into simple rafts. Maybe they made reed boats, bundles of reeds tied together, like the ones later built by ancient Egyptians and South American cultures. Or maybe they even created dugout canoes, burning and scraping out the inside of a log to make it hollow. That would have taken weeks with stone tools, but it's absolutely possible. Whatever they built, it worked. They crossed wide stretches of ocean, not once but many times, in multiple regions of the world. That's astonishing. That takes planning, coordination, and communication. You can't just hop on a raft and hope for the best. You need to test it, plan the route, pick calm weather, and make sure everyone knows what to do. That kind of teamwork suggests Homo erectus had some form of language, not modern speech, but a proto-language rich enough to organize complex tasks. We even have a clue about this. The hyoid bone, a tiny bone in the throat that anchors the muscles used for speech. A Homo erectus hyoid bone found in Italy, about 400,000 years old, has a similar bar shape to ours, closer to humans than to apes, though it lacked the fine muscle attachments needed for full speech. So they probably couldn't talk quite like us, but they definitely communicated, maybe with simple words, vocal tones and gestures. It wasn't silence, it was the early rhythm of language, the first sparks of what would eventually become us. By about 530,000 years ago, we see something remarkable. A Homo heidelbergensis hyoid bone that's virtually identical to ours. That means by this point, humans had developed the physical ability for full speech. And since heidelbergensis evolved from Homo erectus, somewhere between 1 million and 500,000 years ago, language made the leap from primitive proto-speech to something much closer to what we use today. That's a massive evolutionary jump. But even before that, Homo erectus likely had some kind of early language, basic words and sounds, enough to coordinate hunts, plan sea voyages, teach tool-making, and tell the tribe to care for the old, toothless man because he mattered, because he was one of them. Language is what makes us human, and Homo erectus had the beginnings of it. We also have traces, just faint ones, of art. Not much has survived, of course. Most early art was made on materials that decay. But a few pieces did make it through time. One of the most striking is a shell engraved with geometric zigzag patterns, around 546,000 years old, the oldest known deliberate carving ever found. Some scientists think it was just practice or idle scratching, but I don't buy that. There's no functional reason for those lines. It's art, someone creating something simply because they wanted to. There are also small stones shaped to resemble human figures, the earliest possible Venus figurines. Some may have been intentionally altered to emphasize body features like heads or limbs. Were they spiritual symbols, toys, or just curious rocks someone collected? We'll never know. And then there's ochre, that red, brown, or yellow pigment made from minerals. We've found pieces of it at Homo erectus sites dating back 1.4 million years. What did they use it for? Body paint? Decorating tools or shelters? Some kind of ritual? We can't say for sure. But what we can say is that using pigment at all suggests symbolic thought, creativity, identity, and culture. They weren't just surviving, they were living. Now, how did Homo erectus actually live day to day? What were their communities like? Their homes? The truth is, social behavior doesn't fossilize. We can't dig up friendships or hierarchies. But there are clues. In Kenya, scientists discovered 97 footprints dating back about 1.5 million years, all made around the same time, all going in the same direction. When analyzed, most belong to adult males, at least 20 of them. That suggests a coordinated group activity, maybe a hunting party, maybe a border patrol, or maybe a group traveling to another camp to trade. Whatever the case, it points to a division of labor, men doing one kind of task, women and children doing another. That division still shows up in modern hunter-gatherer societies. Men often take on the risky big-game hunts, while women focus on gathering plants and small prey, the reliable sources of food. Hunting large animals has a high failure rate. You can spend days tracking one and come back with nothing. Gathering, though, almost always pays off. Having both strategies keeps the group alive even when the hunters strike out. This tells us Homo erectus wasn't just a bunch of individuals surviving by chance. They had organization. They worked together. They had roles and responsibilities, a true social structure. We also have evidence they built shelters, not everywhere, but in some places. In Tanzania, a circular pattern of volcanic stones suggests they may have anchored poles in the ground to build simple huts covered with branches or animal hides. In Europe, the earliest known dwelling, from the Czech Republic, dates to around 700,000 years ago. We only have the post holes and debris left behind, but it's enough to imagine a structure. They also used caves, though interestingly, not as early as you might think. Widespread cave living doesn't appear until about 600,000 years ago. Before that, Homo erectus mostly stayed in open-air camps, probably because caves were already home to dangerous animals, bears, lions, hyenas. Safer to build outside than to pick a fight with a cave bear. Still, when the climate turned cold, caves became a lifeline, warm, sheltered, and easier to defend. One of the oldest examples is Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating back 1.6 million years. There, archaeologists found burned bones, ash and stone tools, clear signs of human occupation. But even then, they likely weren't cave dwellers year-round. More likely, they moved with the seasons, setting up camp near rivers and hunting grounds during warm months, then retreating into caves during storms or cold spells. This nomadic rhythm fits perfectly with a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Follow the herds, follow the food, move when resources run out. A typical Homo erectus group probably had between 20 and 50 members, big enough to hunt large animals and defend themselves, small enough to feed everyone. Multiple groups probably knew each other, meeting occasionally to trade, exchange knowledge, or find mates. Interbreeding between groups would have been crucial to avoid inbreeding and keep the population healthy. Of course, not every encounter was peaceful. Competition, territorial fights, even raids probably happened, just like in modern forager societies. But within each group, cooperation was essential. You couldn't survive alone. You needed others to help you hunt, protect the children, and share food when times were tough. And we know they cared for each other. Fossils show individuals who lived long after serious injuries, things that would have been fatal without help. A toothless old man, a child with a spinal deformity, another with a damaged skull who still managed to survive for years. That means someone fed them, protected them, and valued them. And that, more than tools or fire or language, is what truly made Homo erectus human. Some of these people lived for years with injuries or conditions that would have been crippling. That takes a community, literally. Someone had to mash food for the old man who'd lost his teeth. Someone had to carry the kid with a curved spine when the tribe moved to a new camp. Someone had to keep an eye on the child with a brain deformity so they didn't wander off or fall into danger. That's humanity at its core, not the strongest or the smartest, but the ones who care, who help each other survive. And that's what makes the extinction of Homo erectus so heartbreaking. By about 100,000 years ago, they were gone. After nearly 2 million years of success, they vanished. We've already talked about the main theories: climate shifts, competition with other human species, and the possibility of being absorbed through interbreeding. But let's look a little deeper at what their final days might have been like. Around that time, the planet's climate began to swing wildly. Earth was entering an ice age. Temperatures plummeted, glaciers expanded, and sea levels dropped. Ecosystems changed, food sources shifted. Homo erectus had lived through ice ages before, but this time things were different. Because this time, they weren't alone. Modern Homo sapiens were spreading out of Africa. We were more adaptable, more innovative, more strategic. We built better tools, better weapons, and we wanted the same food, land, and shelter erectus depended on. When two species fight for the same limited resources, one usually loses. Biologists call it competitive exclusion, the idea that even a small advantage, generation after generation, eventually pushes one species out. Sadly, Homo erectus was the one that lost. Not by much, but enough. We had ranged weapons, like spears, and later the atlatl, and eventually bows and arrows. We could hunt from a distance. We had better ways to dig up roots, process plants, and pull more calories from the same land. And we had something erectus didn't fully have: complex language. That gave us a massive edge in teamwork, planning, and passing knowledge from one generation to the next. One by one, erectus populations disappeared. First from Africa, then Europe, then the Middle East, and finally Southeast Asia. Their last refuge was the island of Java. The youngest fossils we've found there date to about 100,000 years ago. Maybe they held on a little longer, but if they did, we haven't found proof. And then, they were gone. Or were they? Here's the mystery. We don't actually know what happened to the last Homo erectus groups. Did they die out completely? Or did they merge into us through interbreeding? It's possible some isolated populations simply went extinct, but others, especially those that came into contact with Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or Denisovans, might have mixed. Over generations, their genes could have been absorbed, diluted into the broader human family. We can't confirm it yet. DNA breaks down over time, and erectus fossils are far too old to give us usable genetic samples, but we do know we interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and both of them descended from Homo erectus. So logically, yeah, we probably did too. Which means maybe Homo erectus isn't really gone at all. Maybe they live on, deep in the shared code of all of us. Still, the thought of the last pure erectus tribes fading from the earth after nearly 2 million years, that's devastating. They weren't failures. They weren't dumb. They were extraordinary. They were explorers, innovators, survivors. They invented tools that lasted over 1 million years. They spread across Africa, Asia, and Europe, thriving in deserts, forests, and plains. 2 million years. No other human species even comes close. But in the end, that wasn't enough. The world changed faster than they could adapt. Homo erectus mastered a way of life, but Homo sapiens could master any way of life. And when those two met, there was only ever going to be one outcome. Still, I think we tell this story wrong. We talk about erectus like they lost, like extinction equals failure. But come on, surviving for 2 million years, that's not failure. That's record-breaking success. Modern humans have existed for maybe 300,000 years. We think we're special because we built cities, invented computers, and walked on the moon. But we haven't even made it a quarter of Erectus's lifespan yet, and honestly, looking at how things are going, I'm not sure we'll make it another 1,000,000 years. So maybe the real question isn't, why did Homo erectus die out? Maybe it's, how did they survive so long? I think the answer comes down to 4 things. First, they were generalists. They could eat almost anything: plants, meat, fish, insects. They lived in forests, grasslands, and even cold steppe environments. That flexibility made them unstoppable. Second, they were deeply social. They looked out for each other, shared food, raised their young together, defended their camps. That cooperation made them stronger than any single individual. Third, they were tough, physically and mentally. They could run for hours, survive injuries, and adapt to brutal environments. And fourth, they were innovators. Not as fast-moving as us, but still creative. They discovered fire. They built boats. They made tools that changed over time. They carved, painted, experimented, constantly finding ways to make life better. Put all that together, and you get a species that could survive almost anything: ice ages, droughts, volcanoes, floods. Homo erectus endured them all until they finally couldn't. And that's the real lesson. No matter how strong, smart, or adaptable you are, eventually something comes along that you can't overcome. Maybe it's climate change, maybe competition, maybe just bad luck. Nothing lasts forever. Not even the most successful species on Earth. But Homo erectus came unbelievably close. There's one more thing that keeps nagging at me while researching them. We tend to picture human evolution as this neat, upward ladder. Apes, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and finally, us. As if we're the inevitable goal. But evolution isn't a ladder. It's a bush. Tangled, messy, branching in every direction. Some branches thrive, others get cut short. There's no final form, no destination, just adaptation. Homo erectus wasn't a stepping stone to us. They were their own story, their own success. By the time our ancestors were just learning to survive, Erectus had already perfected it. To them, we would have been the new kids, the upstarts muscling in on their territory. And in a sense, we were the problem, not them. They had created stability, a balance with their world that lasted longer than any civilization ever will. 2,000,000 years of evolution had refined them into exactly what they needed to be. They were the Michael Jordan of early humans, unbeatable in their era. But then the game changed, and suddenly, being the best at the old rules didn't matter anymore. We see that same story play out even now. Companies, ideas, entire industries, thriving for decades, then gone in a blink. Not because they got worse, but because the world shifted faster than they could adapt. In the end, Homo erectus didn't lose. They just reached the limit of their world, and they reached it with grace, unity, and dignity. And maybe that's not extinction. Maybe that's just the final act of survival. Modern humans were younger, more daring, more restless, more willing to take risks. We didn't have 2,000,000 years of tradition holding us back. We could experiment, fail, learn, adapt. We were scrappy. Homo erectus, on the other hand, had 2,000,000 years of success behind them. Tried and true methods, habits that had worked for longer than any species before them. So why would they change? Why question what had always worked? But then, the old ways stopped working. And by the time they realized it, it was already too late. That's the tragedy of Homo erectus. They were too good at surviving, too successful for their own good. There's a concept in evolutionary biology called an evolutionary trap. It's what happens when the signals that once led to survival start leading to failure because the environment has changed, but the species hasn't. Think of moths and light bulbs. For millions of years, Moths used the moon to navigate. Keeping a constant angle to the light helped them fly straight. Then humans invented artificial light, and suddenly that same instinct drove moths in endless circles around a lamp until they burned out or died. The behavior didn't change, the environment did, and the moths couldn't adapt fast enough. Homo erectus did the same thing. They flew straight into the light bulb. Their old strategies, the ones that had kept them alive for ages, stopped working. But they kept using them anyway. Because how do you just throw away the playbook that's worked for 2 million years? You don't? Not easily. Not unless something forces you to. Maybe they just didn't have time. Maybe modern humans showed up too suddenly, competed too fiercely, spread too fast. Maybe if Homo erectus had another 100,000 years, they would have evolved again, adapted, survived. Or maybe not. Maybe their fate was sealed the moment we arrived. Younger, faster, more flexible, more creative. We'll never really know. But here's what we do know. Homo erectus wasn't some primitive brute. They were people, real people, with emotions, fears, and families. They laughed. They told stories by firelight. They cared for their sick and mourned their dead. They were us. Or maybe we are them. Because in a very real sense, Homo erectus never truly went extinct. We carry their genes. We still use their ideas. We live off the inventions they first imagined. Fire, that was their discovery. Hunting large animals, they mastered that. Caring for the sick, the elderly, the injured, that started with them. And spreading across Africa, Asia, and beyond, Homo erectus did it first. We're standing on their shoulders, and those shoulders belong to giants. So when I think about Homo erectus disappearing, I don't see it as failure, I see it as transformation. They didn't just die out, they became us. Their story became our story. Their DNA still lives in ours. That old man sitting by a fire being cared for by his tribe, that's their legacy. That compassion, that cooperation, that spark of humanity, that's worth more than 2 million years of survival. That's immortality. Homo erectus isn't gone. They're still here. In every act of kindness, in every moment we help someone who can't help themselves, in every time we come together to face something bigger than us. That's them. That's their gift. And as long as we remember that, as long as we carry it forward, they'll never truly be gone. So here's to Homo erectus, the most successful human species that ever lived, the explorers, the survivors, the ones who cared for their old, their sick, their wounded, who crossed 3 continents, faced down predators, endured ice ages, droughts and chaos, and kept going. We owe them everything. And wherever our story ends, whether we make it another 2 million years or fade out in a few centuries, I hope we live up to their example. I hope we're as tough, as adaptable, as compassionate, as human as they were. Because that's what it means to be Homo erectus. That's what it means to be human. And that legacy deserves to last. You know what really gets me? We've studied Homo erectus for over a century, and we still barely understand them. Every discovery rewrites the story. Every fossil adds a new layer. Recently, researchers re-examined some of the Peking man fossils and found cut marks on the bones, possible signs of cannibalism. Now, before you get grossed out, that doesn't necessarily mean they were eating each other for fun. It could have been ritual, a way to honor the dead. Or maybe it was pure survival in desperate times. We just don't know. And that's what's so haunting. There's so much we'll never really understand. What did they think about? What did they believe in? What made them laugh, or cry, or fall in love? All we have are fragments. A tooth, a stone tool, footprints in ancient mud. And from those pieces, We try to rebuild 2 million years of human life. It's like trying to understand modern civilization from a handful of artifacts. You'd miss the art, the music, the laughter, all the things that make us human but don't leave fossils. But Homo erectus had all of that too. They had stories and traditions, inside jokes, favorite places, memories of people they'd lost. They had love, loss, triumph, failure, a whole human experience. They weren't just primitive humans with stone tools. They were people, real people, living full and complicated lives. And that's what I want you to remember. When you hear about Homo erectus or any extinct human species, don't think of them as less than us. Think of them as us. Different in some ways, sure, but human in every way that really matters. They loved their children. They mourned their dead. They helped each other through hard times. They celebrated their victories. They told stories by firelight. And they found joy in simply being alive. They were human as you and me. And they deserve to be remembered not as failures or evolutionary dead ends, but as the incredible, resilient, compassionate people they were. So the next time you hear that Homo erectus went extinct, remember the old man by the fire. Remember the tribe that cared for him, even when he could no longer hunt or help. Remember that being human isn't about strength or intelligence. It's about caring for one another. It's about surviving together. That's the legacy of Homo erectus, and it's still burning in us.